Mino Line Media presents the Business First Podcast.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonya Alleyne. I am your host, and today we're going to talk about the food business, and particularly restaurants. And the gentleman in the studio today knows everything there is to know about the opportunities and the challenges in this industry, particularly in Washington, D.C. He is Mr. Shawn Townsend, the president and CEO of the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington. Welcome, Shawn.
Thanks for having me, Sonya. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have you. So you had your starts early in the restaurant business because your dad had a restaurant.
That's right. He actually had a club first, but there was a food element to it, and I'd spend summers in high school actually going down to Charleston, South Carolina, where I'm originally from. I'd work during the daytime at the car wash, and the nightclub was Studio One. It was right across the street. And so I'd get off from the car wash, and then I'd go, over to the club. And, I'd be in the back doing miscellaneous things with him before the club actually opened. So, I remember we'd have crab night, and we're back there cooking the crabs, sometimes going to pick up the seafood, ensuring that the beverages are fully stocked. So from high school, I've been sort of on this path. Did not know then, and did not know at other instances throughout college, and as a young adult, just getting started in my career, had no idea that a lot of the things that had occurred in those moments, that it would align to get me where I am today, running the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington.
Wow. And that's what I love about this podcast. I can almost say with almost everyone that we've had, all of these, whether they were odd jobs or passions or experiences, it always leads you to where you don't know it at the time, right? But it always leads you to where you are. Sounds like you were an enterprising young man. So you were working at a car wash, and then after the car wash, going to do duty at your father's club. Were you always driven? Do you think that's a part of your DNA?
I think that is a part of it. My mom was also a federal government employee. She was a nurse at the at the VA in DC, and so that longevity, the stability. My stepfather was in the military. We traveled to Italy. I was in Italy for a couple of years, and so I've been eating food for a long time too, and really exposed to different cultures. I went to school in New Mexico State, and so really being able to experience the Hispanic culture, the Mexican culture of food, and of course my Southern soul, background, my roots in Charleston, where Gullah and Geechee are, those are common known things. And if you ever been to Charleston, if you haven't been to Charleston, you need to go and learn about all the good history down there about food and culture, and also just Black history dating back to when we were crossing over the water, as Charleston is one of the first places where slaves landed. And so just combining all of those things, right, and learning liquor licensing, and doing party promotions, and throwing fight parties in Vegas where Kevin Hart was $10,000 to host a party back then. Like these are all things that I've seen and experienced throughout my career. And yes, I'm definitely blessed. It's all, my faith and really just my upbringing has contributed to my success today.
You also have the distinction of being, which it seems like it's all part of this pattern, the distinction of being DC's first ever director of the mayor's office of nightlife and culture. And that was under the current mayor, Muriel Bowser. What led that to creating this new position just for you? Like, what was it that the mayor or whoever appointed you to see that, Shawn's the perfect person for this based on everything that he's been doing?
So it was a common trend in Europe, night czar, nightmare. There was a night liaison. It was created in Amsterdam, and New York was the first American city to adopt it. New York City, and Councilmember Brandon Todd, former Councilmember Brandon Todd from Ward 4, his office became inundated with calls from residents, complaints from residents, ANCs, about nightlife establishments, restaurants, bars, and Ward 4, Upshur Street, etc. And so he decided, him and his staff, they decided to take a look at New York's legislation, how they created the Office of Nightlife there, and he introduced legislation in DC, and council passed it, the mayor signed it, and in 2018, I was appointed to be the inaugural director of that office, Office of Nightlife and Culture. It was a very good experience. I went through about maybe 4 interviews. There were about 480 applications for this role. Um, it was probably the most applied for position in DC government history. Folks had no idea what this, they had an idea of what the role was, but it was the wrong, all of the wrong ideas. Promoting parties, throwing parties, all of the social aspects
Right.
of nightlife, but that just wasn't it. It was really, truly, you're serving as the liaison. It was a lot of attending meetings in the neighborhood. It was working with the businesses and the residents to try to find common solutions. Because as you know, a lot of DC these days is mixed retail. It's mixed use. We have residents that live above restaurants now, and our corridors are bustling with nightlife activity, and so the office could not have come at a better time. I think that was a very good piece of legislation that Brandon Todd had introduced and passed, and the mayor supported it. And I got all the support I needed in that office to not only, figure out our responsibilities, our role in government, but also, like we were driving the car and building it at the same time. And then COVID hit, right? And so prior to COVID, we were able to establish the city's first economic impact study of nightlife in 2019. So literally a year after the office was created, we went right to work. You will hear these stats over and over again. The city generates about $500 million in sales tax revenue per year from hospitality. $7 billion is spent after 5 p.m. About 65, 70,000 jobs are created as a result of the hospitality in DC specifically. And so, we created the blueprint of data that was needed to justify why nightlife, why hospitality was so important to the economics of the city and the region. And so, very proud of the work that we did in that office. That office is still very critical to hospitality, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, etc. And COVID hit. We did some good things during COVID, and I was tired. I was tired after that. It was time for me to leave government. I had spent 12 years.
What were some of the biggest lessons you learned during that time? Being so you had obviously worked in the restaurant business, but being on the other side to be a liaison and to really bring all of the challenges that these businesses were facing and have the government really understand how best to support them. What did you learn about that
No,
process?
it's a good question, Sonia. So, I have three different perspectives. One as a business owner via my father, but then two as an enforcer, as a regulator. I spent 4 or 5 years with DC's alcoholic beverage agency that they manage and issue all of the licensing, the alcohol licensing in the city. So I was out at night. I would get off at 4 a.m. every other weekend. I was doing inspections. I was writing reports, issuing citations. And so, I had that perspective. And then I went over to just strictly serving as a liaison and in a non-enforcement capacity, which is very hard to do. it is very hard. The public perception of me being appointed as an enforcer into this role to help businesses was very brave of the mayor to do, but also it required me to put my head down and do the work and prove to folks that I was there to help and not be the police. And so, going into this role, I knew I had, I had some real work ahead of me because there were vocal people saying that, the mayor made the wrong choice by appointing someone with this background, but I think she saw it different, and I was able to convince the interview panel, of the same thing. Those were actually good qualities for me to have in this role so that I could help, engage with businesses and show them right from wrong and educate them in awareness, but also the same for the community as well. I was able to dispel some of the myths and fictitious things about nightlife and hospitality that residents and ANC commissioners and council members knew that just weren't true. And so those things that, some viewed as things in my career that I had done that would have, not enabled me to serve in a capacity that I did, it actually worked out in my favor. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate to have the background that I did, and I was able to use it to the best of my abilities to help not only operators and workers, but really the residents. I was able to really hone in on helping workers. And I mean, we protested Metro for later hours. We held rallies for this, and the streetery concept, the outdoor dining that you see, that came from our office. We gave $4 million in grant funding to help winterize outdoor patios in the midst of the pandemic, working with Home Depot and Ace Hardware to ensure that we can get all of the patio heaters that we needed at a time when they were stuck in California, they were stuck on ships, they couldn't get past customs. We were working with other folks throughout the country to ensure that we got patio heaters. And these were things that were just important to restaurants and bars and nightclubs. And this was all through engagement, all through listening and being eyes and ears for the mayor. This is how we were able to take that information back in house and say, how can we best support businesses during this time of need? They were some of the first businesses to close and some of the last businesses to open. And we are still, experiencing remnants of the pandemic today. And so I'm just very fortunate to have gone through those many different positions to really have a good understanding of the hospitality ecosystem here in DC and in the region.
I do want to talk to you about the aftermath of the pandemic, the effect on businesses. But I also want to go back to something you said about the myths about nightlife businesses. I have friends. I've reported on other businesses that have really struggled in their communities because of either the thought of the types of people that would be coming through or the noise. And how were you able to have communities be more receptive to these businesses that were excited to be where they are and waiting to engage a clientele, but we're fighting with residents and local politicians who didn't want them there?
That was probably one of the toughest things to do in that role. And you truly serve as a mediator between, residents and business, and elected sometimes. So you really have to, focus in on the business to figure out what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And a lot of times, it was educating businesses on what they should be doing. And, I'm a resident of DC. And so when I hear loud music outside, I'm wondering where it's coming from, right? I'm wondering if it's past 10 o'clock and they are violating the noise, regulations. And so these are all valid concerns of residents that, you, as a business owner, regardless of what industry you're in, you have to take these concerns as a community partner. You got to take them seriously. And so it's my job to just make sure that the businesses were taking these complaints or challenges or issues that the community had seriously. And then on the flip side of it, it was my job to make sure that we bring communities together because the community isn't full, it isn't complete without one or the other. You got to have residents, you got to have people, and you have to have business in order to attract the people to live in these communities. And so it's my job to really just ensure that they work together. They understand that, you know, both sides will not always be happy every single conversation. However, through these conversations, through working through some of these challenges and some of these issues, we can, in most cases, find common ground for the better of the entire community. And in most cases, it worked. And sometimes, I'm gonna just be honest with you, Sonia, it did not work. And then government and enforcement had to take over.
So from all that you've said, it is obvious why you are the president and CEO of the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington. So much information you have and so much insight. But I was also surprised at some of the data that you had been reporting on during this time, that last year, roughly 50 locally owned restaurants opened, but also, if I'm correct, roughly 72 restaurants opened last year. And what is it about the restaurant business that both can happen at the same time? You can have a large number of businesses closing at the same time, have almost the same number opening up. Whereas people don't seem to be discouraged by it. Almost in any other industry, people are just like, no, that's a tough business. But in this business, you can almost find as many opening as you will find closing.
One thing about restaurant owners that I have learned over the years is that they are very passionate about what it is that they do. They love food, they love serving, they love providing support to families, they love creating spaces of comfort, of healing, of business transactions. And so if someone tells me that they own a restaurant, it is not for a paycheck. It is not solely for a paycheck because the margins in the restaurant business are so super razor thin now more than ever. If you own a restaurant in this climate, you are truly doing it because you feel that it is your purpose. You are passion driven. You know, after the pandemic, there were businesses that barely made it to the other side, and that were suffering and had to make a conscious decision on whether or not they continue to dig themselves in a hole, or do they, walk away and start over with something new. There were businesses that had to renew leases, and we all know sometimes that landlords, especially in the commercial space, they don't negotiate because, on the flip side of it, DC continues to be a hotbed for celebrity chefs, entrepreneurs who want to open restaurants. We have now more than ever top Michelin restaurants, James Beard recipients, and finalists. And so when you look at those characteristics of DC and this region, regardless of a pandemic, regardless of workforce shortage, regardless of crime concerns, regardless of inflation, regardless of the price of eggs going up, regardless of any of these variables that may exist that cause some restaurants to close, we have a record-breaking number of restaurants that opened last year and many in the pipeline for the rest of this year.
And so in this role of as president and CEO, what has been your vision for how to best support the restaurants, particularly coming out of the pandemic?
I think it's inclusivity, ensuring that, we have about 1,400 members on our roster at RMW, with about half of that being in DC proper. And then We also have membership in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Northern Virginia. And one of my priorities is ensuring that the restaurant community throughout the region knows that we are here to support them, regardless of what color you are or what type of cuisine that you serve. And so, really getting out in the community and meeting with folks that aren't necessarily engaged with the association or even know about the association or understand, all of the things that we do that they can benefit from. That's my goal and that's my priority is increasing that membership number, but increasing it in a very diverse and unique way where we are touching people that the association traditionally just has not touched for a variety of reasons, right? Operators and chefs who own their restaurant. We are 90% independently and locally owned in DC and in the region. You won't, it's not like when you go to Manhattan and you see Fridays on one end of the block, and you see Juniors on the other end of the block. We don't have a lot of chains, national chains in DC. Now, I love my national chains because they're also members too, but we pride ourselves on being locally and independently owned. So, for that reason, unfortunately, they are working in their restaurants most of the times. They are head down in the kitchen and they aren't paying attention to all of the things that are happening, like the elimination of the tip credit system, where this implementation over the next couple of years will require you to spend about 200% more on labor costs for your tip workers in your restaurants. And so the advocating and the legislative work that we do in all three jurisdictions is worth more than any membership due that we could ever charge one single restaurant. And so that is my message to everyone that I talk to is that, the amount of advocating work that we do in the Wilson building in Virginia and in Maryland is just that alone is worth the membership. We also do Restaurant Week. If you win a Rammy, that is the biggest marketing tool to your business that you can have in the region. Besides mission, oh
A
yeah,
little bit about
oh
that.
yeah, we'd love to talk about it. But that is your as a restaurant winning a Rammy locally, regionally is the largest marketing asset to you. And so, if you are a member of the association, you can win a Rammy. If you're not, you're just missing out on that opportunity to even be nominated. Some people don't even want to win the Grammy. They just want to be nominated because when we put out our list of nominees, we got hundreds of thousands of people that say, "Oh, we're gonna try out all the restaurants that are nominated," right? And so it becomes a big marketing tool for restaurants. And so, my priority is just making sure that we're pulling in folks that traditionally have not been a part of the association.
I'm going to take you back just a little. You mentioned something that I am not familiar with. You said something about tip legislation. Can you talk a little bit about that and why restaurateurs
Yep.
should
So a
be
few
subject
years
to that?
ago, more than a few years ago, before the pandemic, there was this big push by outside organizations to eliminate the tip credit system. So, in layman's terms, historically, restaurants would pay bartenders and tip workers $2 an hour, three, four, $5 an hour, and they would earn the rest in tips.
Mhm.
And so there were some who were very vocal about the unfair practices of the tip credit system, and they wanted to push for the elimination of. So if I make $3 an hour, the tip credit system it goes into effect if I whatever I don't make between my hourly wage and the minimum wage, the restaurant that tip credit system kicks in, right? And so now what we are doing, I'm trying to get the timeline right. So residents in DC voted before the pandemic to eliminate the tip credit system, off of the message of don't you want residents to or workers to have a fair and decent living wage? The answer is always going to be yes, unequivocally. Um, so voters passed it. It was a ballot initiative. DC Council repealed that ballot initiative because um, workers stormed the Wilson building and said this is not something that we want because we make plenty of money with our tips. We don't want the minimum wage that everyone else has. Keep us down low on paper, and we make a whole lot of money in tips. Don't change the system. Years later, at the tail end of the pandemic, this advocacy work starts again. 72% of the district vote for it because they want fair and decent living wages for restaurant workers, for tip workers. Now we're on the other side of that. The elimination of the tip credit system has started. So we went from $6 to $8. We're now at $10. For every year, it goes up $2 to 2027. Once we get to full minimum wage, the tip credit system is eliminated. And so now, as a bartender, I will make whatever the minimum wage is, and what the restaurant industry is doing to offset the increase in labor costs, because now I'm paying you, I'm not paying you $4 an hour anymore. I'm paying you 17. And so that's for every tip worker in my business. That money has to come from somewhere. So we're either increasing prices on the menu, or what's causing all the commotion these days is you're seeing service charges on receipts, right? And so there we go. And so now you're seeing 20%, 15%, 5%. That service charge is to help offset the increase in labor costs to pay the tip workers. If restaurants don't do that, you're paying 20, 30, $40 for a cheeseburger. You know, the prices of the food has gone up on the menu. And, there's a big debate about what restaurants should be doing. Some say just put it all in the price. If we're gonna just take away the service charge, just put it in the price and let me decide what I want to tip. But each restaurant has to do what works for their model. And so over the next couple of years, you'll see different things, different models, depending on what restaurant you go into. But that is essentially Initiative 82, the elimination of the tip credit system.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because my friends and I have been reviewing our bills at these restaurants. And I think what we had been wondering is, does the tip actually go to the tip that we now have signed on, or it's not even an option, that is part of the bill? Does the server get that?
So my yes, the answer is yes, unequivocally, because
Okay, or at least they're supposed to get it.
that service charge is allocated towards operating the expenses of the business. And so if we look at a pie, right, and you see what the business spends the most money on, majority of the times it is rent, but more importantly, it is payroll. And so that service charge, unequivocally, regardless if there's a, by law, regardless if there's a note on the menu or signage that says 3% goes to the employee, 5% goes to the operational expenses of the business. So there's your 8%. Regardless of what the note says, the message is that, and what people tend to not understand is that 8% goes to the business, yes, but a certain percentage of that is going right back out to the employee too, because the owner of the operator is now paying more in labor expenses. But to answer to nail down on your question, there's legislation that says if you implement a service charge, you have to include specific language on your menu, on your website, visible in the restaurant, or the server himself or herself has to make note of that to the customer prior to them ordering, so that they know so that they know, one, that there's a service charge, and that they know exactly where it's going to.
I was also surprised in some of the articles that I'd seen that you had been quoted in, is that since the pandemic, traffic has been reduced, and in some instances, like, people are going out less. And I kind of felt, just kind of watching and hearing that, after the pandemic, everybody was so excited to be out. You naturally think that, yeah, these restaurants are going to be the benefit of that. But that hasn't necessarily been the
Well,
case.
I mean, yes and no. I think both can be true at the same time in this instance. You are absolutely right. After the pandemic, when the floodgates opened, people were outside, people were whining, dining, clubbing, everything. They were also traveling to other parts of the country and world, quite frankly. The federal government has not come back. So that means that downtown restaurants have taken the hit, and suburban restaurants are flourishing because people are working from home.
Yeah.
And so your neighborhood restaurants have not seen the dip quite like, restaurants in busy corridors of the city and of the region. And so I, it's really hard to say right now because happy hour has not come back. When's the last time you've been to a really good happy hour in the city? When's the last time you've had lunch at a restaurant? And when's the last time you've gone to dinner at 9, 10 o'clock after a movie or a show and you found a restaurant that was open? I went to RPM recently and their kitchen closed at 9:30. And that is because the foot traffic was low. They don't want to keep workers on the payroll for longer than they really need to, where it makes sense. And so these are all factors that really sort of challenge the CFO or the chief financial officer's report that, hey, I'm looking at all these sales tax numbers and these payroll numbers. Restaurants are back. They are back pre-pandemic levels. That doesn't include inflation numbers. That doesn't include the cost of it just costs more to operate a business these days. And so they are paying taxes on these illuminated numbers that did not exist prior to the pandemic. And so it's a tomato right now, but we are hopeful that federal government workers will come back in some capacity over the next couple of years. We understand that this might be the new normal. But, I mean, the future's bright. We've seen there's a study out there that shows cell phone traffic at night downtown, and like DC is a place where people come, they might not come out during the day, but they are definitely coming out at night.
What would you say to DC is a unique town, as you've explained. For people who are listening who live in different parts of the country, what would you recommend for someone who's sitting there going, I did want to open up a restaurant until I listened to this podcast, or, I am passionate about, going forward with my idea to open up a restaurant, or someone who's already in it and struggling. Like what sorts of advice would you offer to someone listening?
I think follow your passion, follow your dream. It's just like any other industry. Any industry that you want to get into right now, if it's not AI, it has its own challenges. Even AI has its challenges and concerns. And so, regardless of the industry, if you are passionate about it and this is something that you really want to do, there is a brick and mortar vacant space available for you somewhere in this region, whether it's in DC, whether it's in Virginia or Maryland. Those are all variables that we can figure out. But each jurisdiction has lots of opportunity. We are all, I hear it all the time. I when I talk to, County Executive also Brooks out in Prince George's County, she's trying to recruit businesses there, and she wants DC restaurants to expand and open a second or third location there. When I talk to folks in Montgomery County or in Arlington, like they're all seeing the thriving industry that exists in DC proper, and they now see the federal, the worker situation, the telework situation change, and they want to make sure that they can provide those amenities to the folks that live in those respective jurisdictions as well. And so there's plenty of opportunity out there. Nail down on finances, nail down on capital, on resources, nail down on government assistance and grant programs, nail down on a business plan, right? These are all things that all jurisdictions provide. So please do not be frightened or alarmed by any of the statistics or this conversation. DC is a hotbed. It is saturated with restaurants, but also the best thing about this region, we have the most diverse culinary cuisine, in my opinion, in the country and maybe in the world. If you go to another country, if you go to Italy, you eat Italian food, right? I can give you 5 Italian restaurants throughout the region right now that are amazing, but you can also go down the street and have Ethiopian food, have Korean food, have Japanese food, have Mexican food. Like we have our bench of restaurants in this region are deep. It's deep. So we are unique in that sense, and I think that continues to be the attraction of potential restaurateurs to the region.
What's next for your organization? Anything coming down the pike that your members can look forward to, and that the residents of DC or tourists of DC can enjoy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure when this will air, but August 12th is the start of Restaurant Week, our summer restaurant week, and so we pride ourselves on this programming twice a year when restaurants are at their slowest in January and in August. And so we have over 350 restaurants participating in Summer Restaurant Week this year. That is the highest number we've ever had, and it also shows the enthusiasm of restaurants in this region. And so we're just coming off of our Rammy's Gala, which was in July, where we award different restaurants in different categories. It's like the Grammys, but it's better. It's called the Rammys. We do a huge award ceremony where we honor milestone restaurants who've been around for 25, 50 years. And then we also have a big party afterwards at the convention center. It's about 3,000 people. So we're just coming off of that. We're going right into Restaurant Week. We've got DC Cocktail Week at the end of the year where we celebrate the lifting of the prohibition of alcohol in DC. And then we go right into Restaurant Week in the winter and the top of January. So we're building out some programming. We also do trainings in between that. So sexual harassment training. We do alcohol awareness training, safe serve training, food handlers training. There are a number of trainings that we offer. And if you want to take advantage of these opportunities, ramw.org is our website to join, but also take advantage of the trainings that we have too.
And do you have to be a DC resident is it strictly for DC residents?
Absolutely not. We are a regional trade association, which means that, we are the largest voice for the smallest businesses in DC, Maryland, and Virginia as it relates to restaurants. There's a Maryland association and there's a Virginia association too, and we work together well. We work together closely with those associations, especially on the advocacy side of things when it comes time for us to advocate for policy and legislative matters that positively impact the industry.
Well, thank you, Shawn. And for those, you gave the website name. Do you have social media handles that we can follow as well?
Yep, it's just RAMWDC on Instagram and Twitter. My Instagram is Shawn J. Townsend on Instagram and Twitter, and ramw.org is our website.
Thank you so much. And I learned a lot on this, so I'm sure our listeners did. Thank you so much for giving us all this wonderful insight. And we wish you the best. And would love to have you back at some point just to hear how you guys are progressing and hopefully to hear how the restaurant business is thriving and growing in the DC, Virginia, Maryland.
Well, thank you for having me. I'd be happy to come back and talk all things hospitality in this region.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back again next week with another great guest. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonya Alleyne. Executive producer Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcast. On social media on IG at business_first_podcast. Follow the Mean Old Line Media Podcast Network on IG at Mean Old Line Media. Get the Mean Old Line Media app in the App Store or Google Play. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.